welcome to a special series with the New Indian Express. It's a Platinum Pride, India at 75. We're using this opportunity to look back and look forward. And today we're looking at the economy in particular, and two wonderful gentlemen who possibly know much more than anyone else. Currently, we have Professor Rajiv Kumar, who is Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, and as Lord Desai has just told us, is running the country. So thank you so much for joining us. And we have Lord Meghnad Desai, who of course everyone knows and loves, not just for his views on the economy, but also on Dilip Kumar and other such wonderful things. He's of course Professor Emeritus, London School of Economics. Thank you so much for joining us. And we have Mr. Prabhu Chawla, Editorial Director, also an economist. Some people forget that. They tend to look at only his career as a political journalist, but he also taught economics and knows a little bit, I think, about the subject. So hello and welcome, Mr. Chawla, as well.
Kaveri, I have to interrupt you to say that I responded to Meghnad as saying that I have no such pretension that I run the country.
Exactly. Yes, I'm glad.
That should be on record.
Of course, it should be.
But perception, you can't, Rajiv, you can't remove the perception.
No.
Maybe CEO is running, therefore they are saying that Rajiv is running.
Well, as long as Sensex doesn't mind, we don't mind.
Right. So, so really, gentlemen, just the first question that I'd like to put to both of you. We've seen the economy over the years, 75 years, all the things that went wrong, all the things that went right. Where do you see it headed now?
Thanks, Kaveri, for that question. And I think, and I sincerely believe this, that we are on the cusp of a major change now, cusp of a major transformation. And with all that has been done in the last 7 years in terms of foundational, structural, difficult reforms, I think we've now put a framework in place where we will see the private sector driving growth and being in the driver's seat going forward. This government, and led by the Prime Minister, is deeply conscious of the fact that it is the private sector, the private investor, who will lead the growth, forward. And so and therefore all the changes that you've done in the ease of business and GST and in reducing the corporate income tax rate and faceless assessment and relaxing FDI rules, etc. And I can go on. The bankruptcy code, all that has been done to facilitate private investment and private investor. But at the same time, I think I'm confident that this growth rate will be sustained because enough measures have been taken to ensure that when growth happens, it also goes down to the bottom of the pyramid, and that people don't get left out of it. So it is the financial inclusion that we've had, with the Jan Dhan accounts, with the deep, the JAM Trinity direct benefit transfer, with all the other schemes that we've had like Ujjwala and Saubhagya and so on, and we will make sure that this growth is more inclusive than in the past. And finally, that this government is focused very sharply on achieving a green transition. The 450 gigawatts of renewable energy, our focus on hydro, the river linkage projects, and the fact that we want to now on the 16th of December, the Prime Minister is going to announce a major initiative on agroecology, which will make sure that you increase the organic carbon content in the soil, which can become the largest carbon sequestration program perhaps in the world. All of that would mean that India will achieve sustained rapid growth with inclusion and sustainability. So I think that's where we are, and you will see that the growth rate will be maintained at plus 8% going forward. The IMF has said that our growth rate in fiscal year 22-23 will be above 8%. And I think that will be sustained as we go forward with inclusion and environmental protection.
Wonderful. Lord Desai, I bring you in here and ask about this. The key thing that Professor Kumar said, private sector driving the economy. You know better than others how the private sector has been anathema to most governments. Do you feel that this government has changed the way it looks at the private sector as a whole, and that it is true that it will now drive the economy?
Well, I'm old and I've seen a lot of these things before, I'm sorry to say. Pandit Nehru had made lots of promises, and so had Indira Gandhi and so on. I have been very much supportive of Narendra Modi's Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas program because I thought that was an inclusive development program. And I think the first 4 years were very good. And then since about then, we have had a growth setback. Then we had pandemic. And the growth rates which have been seen from recovering from pandemic, like in every other country, they're outrageously high, but we don't know whether they'll be sustained. Yeah. Now, interesting question in India is two things. First of all, I'm very glad that at last there is a government in power which will trust the private sector.
Right.
We have had this thing. Other Asian countries have always been a partnership between the state and the private sector. In India, it's always the private sector is very kind of untrusted by all the political parties. There is no political party in India which openly says private sector is the heart of the economy. Private sector will take us forward. It's always the government will take forward. The government will tell the private sector what to do, etc. And if there's I've not been there for a while, so if there's a genuine change in political attitude about the private sector, I think that's very welcome because ultimately, people don't realize that the entire farming sector is private sector.
Exactly. Yeah.
The farmers are private sector. It is not just industrialists. It is not just the big multimillionaire industrialists. But although there is no problem why they should not be trusted, even if they are multimillionaires. But I think from the beginning there was this idea that no, can't trust the private sector, the state must do it. And the state was not very good at doing it. So if the state is now becoming a helpful state, an assisting state, rather than a leading state, then of course India will thrive. And Rajiv has all the information in his hand, and I'm pleased with what he says. I will see when it happens. Let me say that I have I've seen big promises in India, and the people are very patient. They tolerate failures, but I think what is needed is sustained growth, and sustained growth even at 5% would be good. Rajiv said 8%. Well, that would be very good. But we only had growth when the world economy is growing, like we had in the first few years of the new century. But then the global economy was growing, so we kind of benefited from that. So India has to exploit the outside world to help its growth, but it also has to have this partnership between the public sector and the private sector. And slightly, at some stage, the state will have to shrink slightly because the bureaucracy is very big and extremely expensive. I have to say, when I look at the salary arrangements and the pension arrangements, so good news so far. But I will hold my judgment for a while and see what will happen, because as a young person who was 7 years old when India became independent, I have nothing but disappointments along the way. I was promised a much bigger India. I'm still being promised a much bigger India also.
Kaveri, I'm a little amused because both are big economists in terms of their background. Not, I have been a student of economics. Basic economics I have studied and taught as well. I'm a little confused about certain things because we were taught Rosto stages of development at the time. That you go from developing to underdeveloped to developed to whatever. So there was the role of the agriculture sector, then there was the manufacturing sector, and there was the tertiary sector services. I don't know how it happened in India because suddenly we bypass all Rosto economics altogether. Now tertiary sector is still a developing society and still it contributes about 57% of the GDP at the moment. And how it happened, the private sector obviously gained out of it. Private sector has been playing a very important role for the past 20 years, ever since Narasimha Rao started the reform sector.
Yeah.
So if Rajiv says private sector, yes, private sector is a good thing or bad thing. I'm for private sector ideologically. But what private sector has done to India is a story in itself. But coming back to your point of view, the farm sector is private sector. But the farm sector, which was giving us about 60% of the GDP about 30 years ago, gives only 15% now. Where the private sector is gone. Whatever the advance payment, I'm coming, what you will explain, I know theoretically, I'm asking what the perception is. Because people living, still 50% of the people depend on 15% of the GDP. Other question arises, GDP at what prices? Is Rajiv telling us GDP 8% growth at current prices or constant prices?
Yeah.
Nobody is talking about these things these days. Everybody says 7%, 8%, 9%. At what prices?
I think let Rajiv respond.
Come on, this is. I mean, what can I say? Whenever we talk about GDP growth, we talk about at real prices.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Constant price.
We always talk about at constant prices.
Okay.
We never talk about it current prices.
Okay.
On agriculture, what you said is that when it is the Rostovian principle that first the primary sector and then the secondary sector and then the tertiary sector contribute increasing percentage shares of your GDP. So the share of GDP agriculture coming down to 18%, by the way, if you include agriculture and forestry and so on, is just in the right direction. What's happened is that India has missed in some sense the manufacturing.
Absolutely.
And we've shifted to services which account for more than 50% of our economy. Now, this is where, for example, and I say this with such confidence that the first time ever since independence, the government has launched the production-linked incentive scheme for the manufacturing sector. 13 sectors have been selected, and we have earmarked 1.97 lakh crore of rupees, that's I think close to $27 billion, as fiscal incentives for those firms, private sector firms, which achieve global scale and global competitiveness. And that's the criteria. This incentive will be given to them only if they achieve that, not in advance. So we are trying to push that manufacturing sector forward. And about the mistrust that Meghnad mentioned, Meghnad, I want to really assure you on this, that there is, otherwise, there is a firm commitment in the government. I mean, the Prime Minister said this on August 15th speech, that they are the wealth creators. They are the ones whom we should promote and facilitate. And government has to be in a facilitating role. If that was not the case, then we would not have Air India privatization. And Ashoka Hotel would not be on the list for being handed over to the private sector. And we have an asset monetization pipeline of 6 lakh crore, where underutilized assets of the government, the public sector, are going to be handed over, on a lease basis, on a sort of, on lease terms to the private sector for better utilization. Public-private partnership has entered a new era with the coming of private trains, with the development of stations by private sector, by bringing in private contractors to, redesign and redevelop our stations and airports. So I think what you will see going forward, and by the way, the last point here is that the startup culture that we've got, 52 unicorns 52 companies with a market cap of more than $1 billion is all private sector. They are changing the name of the game today. So, I think the pandemic has overshadowed all of this. But as we get out of these shadows, you will see the Indian economy, gaining strength, and then really, hopefully, then, erasing your disappointments of the past.
Okay, let me just say a couple of things. Last time I heard the scheme for private sector taking over railway lines had not got any takers. Maybe you're telling me that now the situation has changed and the private sector will run some, which is very good. But my idea is that ultimately too many subsidies are being absorbed by the private sector. I mean, look at our green revolution. Basically, the amount of subsidies the farmers eat up in electricity and water and the MSP is completely irrational in my view. But there we are. We have to pay all those things. So I think in a sense, yes, we will have to, at some stage, ask the question about efficiency, return for expenditure of each sector, the government sector, the private sector. And then one more thing, you mentioned unicorns. I think basically the top 20% of the Indian economy is very prosperous. They are as prosperous as rich countries. That's where the unicorns grow. The unicorns grow because of that, because of e-commerce. But, as the first lockdown illustrated, 200 million to 300 million people are wandering around the country with not good jobs and so on. They are migrating and so on. I think that lockdown crisis, I at least at that time, wrote all sorts of things saying, how can we solve the problem of the people who are not income tax free farmers, nor are they business people, but they really have been neglected by the country. I'm not blaming the present government. They've been neglected since 1947. I mean, surplus labor has not been harnessed in this country, and because we went for machinery and all that sort of stuff. So I think we have to have the strength of as much employment of our work as possible, and really became much more critical about the government. Sorry, Prabhu.
No, sorry, Professor, both of you are obviously on the same line as far as the philosophy of economics is concerned. Privatization. But can India afford so much of privatization?
Public ownership, Prabhuji, tried public ownership.
Okay, I'll come back to that also.
We chaired Pandit and didn't work.
It didn't
work at all.
Oh, yeah, Maggie Thatcher, what she did at that time.
Prabhu, I'm beginning to wonder as to why you are so against the private sector.
No, I said I support private sector. The kind of private sector I support is not the private sector which you are encouraging.
Why?
I'm coming back to that. Let me complete my thing.
But
for example, IBC, NCLT. I give you hundreds of examples. I'm working on a story, of course. You have sold various companies, NCLT. I remember a couple of companies, I don't want to name anybody. The company which was worth 10,000 crore rupees went down, was sold for 400 crore rupees under the IBC. Bought by one of the relatives of the person. And the same management is back which sacked the company. There are hundreds of examples like that. You have sold asset in the name of the privatization and overwriting everything else. I will not get into the controversy. I'm coming to the basic thing at all. Basic thing is that when you're talking about privatization, you spoke about the startup section, why the employment is so low in India now. Even the recent figures that come, we are much below Bangladesh even. Because you are able to create certain hype in the society. If top 10%, as you rightly pointed out, 20% are prosperous, but 1% are holding about 70% of the wealth of this country. It has gone up during the last 20 years, including the Congress regime. I'm not blaming it. But particular thought process is going into the country. Okay, let us privatize without any bottom. It is not, as you pointed out, it will go down, top down. It is not happening. top down. It is concentration of wealth which is happening in the country, which is not leading into employment. You spoke about subsidies of the farming sector. In the United States, how much subsidies they give to the agriculture? Do we ever speak about that? We talk about farming sector subsidies. What about the revenue foregone to the manufacturing sector or big industries? Forget about the IBC, which is written lakhs and lakhs of crore rupees have been written off. That may be a different reason for all that. What about incentives given to the private sector? Because 25% corporate tax is coming down. Good thing. It is a good thing happening. But let it generate employment at all. It is not generating employment. The kind of subsidies, kind of incentive which this government has given to the private sector. I think private sector is betraying the confidence of the people. They are making money for themselves.
Prabhu, I beg to strongly disagree with you.
Because you have a right to disagree.
Because you see, the point is that the government has now got schemes, for this whole PLI scheme, and the fact that your exports are expanding at 40% plus this year. Exports are inherently employment intensive.
But the data has gone down. Unemployment is going up. That is a data government data.
But even the CMI data shows you that the unemployment is at the same level as it was at the pre-pandemic level. It's not gone up. I mean, at least what the PLI, the periodic labor force survey that you've got, which is at the moment only for June 20, has shown that the unemployment has not gone up. So where are these figures coming from? By the way, I mean, just think of it, that if you look at the EPFO figures, the employment, EPFO, the Employment Provident Fund organization figures, they will tell you that between April to September 2020, which was last year, April 2021, when we had the second wave, there were net addition of about 67 lakh employees in the EPFO registers, and these are people who are working in firms with more than 20 employees. So there is this myth that is being created that unemployment is going up. India's problem is underemployment. That's India's problem. And India's problem is those 43% of our workforce which is caught in the agricultural sector. India's problem is those people which are now dependent on Manrega, but they're underemployed. So that's our problem, not open unemployment. Our informal sector, where a large number of people work, 80% of our workforce is probably on the informal sector. A lot of them, a great majority of them, I agree, would be low productivity earners, and therefore underemployed. Now, for them, what we have to create is the impetus, the growth impetus. There is no other way but to push growth, push infrastructure, push logistics, make our firms globally competitive, make the share of our manufactured exports in the world trade has stagnated at 1.67% over the last 4 decades.
Rajiv, I'll suggest a question for you. For example, you're talking about the private sector for the last 20 years, top 100 companies, index, Bombay Exchange, whatever. How much employment have they generated in the last 2 decades?
That's not the point.
No, let me complete now.
Prabhu, but that's not the point.
My point is, let me complete my question, please. My point is very clear. You are giving so much. I'm not against incentives at all. I'm saying you must encourage the private sector. What the government is doing too much. But they are not responding positively to the government endeavor, the gesture. If top 20 companies or top 100 companies which have got so much of tax benefit or the incentive, whatever, they did not generate enough organized sectors, not generated enough employment. Their contribution to the revenue of the sector has gone down. In fact, your study must be saying. I'm just saying top 100 companies which are, their market cap has gone by 1,000%. Whether the market is good or bad, I don't want to get into that. But they have not contributed to the growth in terms of employment. You're talking about small sector, you're talking about self-employed, you're talking about PFO and whatever. These are small people. But in the industry as such, as Meghnad was saying earlier, that we have been let down so far. This is a concentration of wealth happening at the top. Person who is 1982, a company person who was worth about 1,000 crore is now about 2 lakh, 3 lakh crore rupees worth of that. I don't mind it, but did he or did she or did anybody else create that much employment for the country or not? Did he pay that kind of revenue to the government?
What I lack in India is what I call a taxpayers party or taxpayers alliance, where they say, where is all this money coming from? all these very big schemes are going on. I mean, when Europe was declared one rank, one pension, I was very unhappy. Let me say, I was very unhappy because it's an unfunded pension scheme. I don't know what the government of India real debt numbers are, but they're piling, liabilities on liabilities like there is no tomorrow. And if I was a taxpayer in India, I would be very demanding of who gets what, because the civil service costs a lot of money. The army, in the army, for the defense expenditure, what I have heard, and I'm not sure I'm correct, that the majority of our money goes to salaries. Rather than for equipment. Now, I think at some stage, somebody really mean will have to come to power and say, I'm not giving you a penny more unless you show me what you're doing for me, sort of thing, And I think it's very good to have government jobs. I was supposed to have a government job had I stayed in the country, and I would have been an IAS or whatever, enjoyed myself. But I think at some stage, like it shows in the case of the farmers, subsidies after subsidies and after subsidies. Nobody keeps an account of what is the true contribution of the farming sector to the economy. How much we pay in water subsidies, seed fertilizer subsidy, electricity subsidy, and no income tax. And so what is the farming sector really contributing to the economy? Now, anyway, that is my private sort of...
Meghna, I'll ask a counter question. I will ask a counter question. Why the same income tax rate is applied to the people who money on the stock exchange like I pay?
Merely 2.7% of the household savings are in the capital market. In the US, that is 60%. And unless we get...
But these 2.7% Rajiv control how much market capitalization.
No, that's the household incomes.
No, household is... But why not taxing? Why do you discriminate? Whether 1%, 2%, why you discriminate?
You have to broaden the capital market.
Like one Nykaa lady becomes similarly billions in one day, doesn't pay any tax.
No, she pays tax. Of course she pays tax.
No, on the capital gains she got, how much tax will be? As much as I pay.
She hasn't gotten any capital gains so far.
She has offloaded.
She will get capital gains only when she offloads in the...
She has offloaded before on the IPO.
No, she has your business of newspaper. You have to make some more capital gains.
No, I'm talking about general rules, what you spoke about, not specifying anybody else. Unlike Paytm and everybody.
Let me say one thing in defense of Rajiv.
Despite your promise to support the private sector, you sound more and more like a really strong socialist. But that's all right. And Meghna, this is the reason.
Equitable distribution of income.
A mean leader in this country. Our democracy is too vibrant. And our democracy is too functional. So for us to have any mean leader would not last a day. So what we have to do,
you are echoing the same thing which your CEO said once, too much of democracy in this country. You are echoing the same thing.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that you can't get a mean leader. You've got to have a leader. Please don't misquote me. We've got to have a leader who is sensitive to the people of this country and their requirements. And that is the only way to run this country.
We are not discussing leader. There is no question of leader here. Leadership is not under discussion.
I think Lord Desai is trying to say something. Yes.
One thing. Let me say one simple thing in defense of Rajiv. In most tax systems, they always tax capital gains differently from income tax, from incomes. So, yes. I mean, all economists believe ideally that they should be taxed at the same rate. Prabhu, that way you're a good economist. But, you still remember what you were teaching. But even in UK, we have a problem that stock market gains and things like that are taxed differentially from earned income. Now, I agree with you that it may not be equitable, but my concern is actually not with the private sector, even that. My concern is with the millions who are underemployed.
Exactly.
And the fact that our agricultural sector, no matter how good it is, 2/3 of the farmers are subsistence farmers who cannot get a living from farming. the income tax being zero doesn't apply to them because they don't have income to be able to pay tax. So I think India has really neglected the poorest and the people in rural areas. And I think, in a sense, despite all the rhetoric, ultimately, urban India has gained tremendously. And whilst rural India has gained somewhat, we still have a residue of 300 to 400 million people who are underemployed, especially women. We have the lowest rate of
participation,
labor force participation. And I think it's a tragedy.
Meghnad, can I take this opportunity to say that you're absolutely right. Indian agriculture needs a complete review. The biotechnological chemical revolution that has brought us here has given us food security. I was in school when the Bihar famines took place. So I know the place, we are talking about living from ship to mouth. So
Absolutely.
They've done a great achievement and brought us here that we have 70 million tons of food grain stocks now in our country, which we can neither export nor can we consume because the prices, the costs are too high. So we need a complete relook at our Indian agriculture development model.
Indeed.
We need to have a thorough review. And I think the Green Revolution 1.0 has run its course. And we now need an agricultural revolution 2.0. And this is where Niti Aayog has been pushing for what we call agroecology and what we call chemical-free agriculture. So that brings the cost down, that reduces water consumption, that reduces, therefore, electricity subsidy, that reduces the fertilizer subsidy, and that, most importantly, brings back the carbon into the soil, which has been decimated.
Yeah, but will the farmers obey?
Yeah.
30 lakh farmers are already practicing it, and you cannot mandate it. You will have to do it through persuasion and through demonstration and by bringing the farmers on board. There is no such thing as a mandatory requirement in this area. Because they are all individuals and they have their choices. But this is what the Niti Aayog has been pushing. You've got to, and I hope that you will hear the government announcing further, advances in this because that I think is the way forward, not just for India, but also for the world, for the planet, because we have to reverse the carbon content in the atmosphere. And this is one form of agriculture which does that. Now there's evidence to show that in many, many studies out of Agriculture University.
But will it solve our underemployment problem? I think that's the main issue.
Underemployment, which is a problem. And I don't think that is going to solve the underemployment.
I'm not sure. But if we make our agriculture globally competitive, which would mean, as Meghnad would understand fully, that the cost of wage goods will come down. Therefore, real incomes will rise without raising the wages, and that will then attract workers that will attract investors to employ more people, and take them out of agriculture. The point is at the moment, a very large number of them are trapped in agriculture.
Let me put it in perspective again, because we're discussing about 75 years of independence, how the economy has gone or changed or whatever. I would like both of you to give some point of view, because when we started, we were a poor country or whatever, because we started with the socialist pattern of society, came back to what Modi had done. Modi had done a lot more things than even 75 years ago they were done. What he done in so many years is much more than what even put together early. Somebody has done it. Earlier, there was concentration of wealth in few hands. Now the gap has widened between that. Earlier, there was socialist pattern. Public sector plays an important role. Now, public sector is almost being minimized. So I would ask you, both of you, because the government has given so much liberty to the private sector. After 75 years, here the Prime Minister is very bold enough in talking about the private sector, wherever he goes. Earlier, there was a Prime Minister who talked badly about the private sector. So there has been a change during the 75 years in terms of economics or politics of economics. I would like both of you to tell us, because now the time has come after 75 years. In 7 years, so much of liberty has given. Doesn't the private sector be held responsible for delivery? They should deliver. Nobody is asking them. Time for giving them is over. time for accountability has come now. I'll ask Rajiv that question. And Professor Meghnath, I will ask you, what kind of things you see fundamental changes Indian economy has gone through in the 75 years?
Well, the first 45 years were wasted, more or less. We really, socialism and all that sort of stuff. I won't go into that. But between 1947 and 1991, the economy didn't do very much. It's called the so-called Hindu rate of growth, which is kind of a little thing. Only with Narasimha Rao, we opened up the economy to the world. Until then, we didn't want foreigners there. We didn't want to import. We didn't want to export. All that. That was a very costly ideological disease that we suffered from. Since 1991, 30 years, we have had a moderately better performance. But it has never, 10 years of consistent 5% plus growth has been very difficult to get. So India needs what I presume IMF is predicting. I hope IMF is right. India needs a 10 to 15 years of steady growth at 7 to 8%, hopefully larger than that. China had double-digit growth. We won't get that. Somehow we have to have policies which will do that. But within that policy, we have to have a way of utilizing the surplus labor we have. Because ultimately, economy has to go down to the bottom and do something for the people. There are a lot of unicorns in the world, and good luck to them, and I hope there are a few more. But ultimately, it's the 300 million people who are underemployed that worries me, because 75 years is too long to wait. If you're like that, and so I think I'm not denying that a lot has been done in the last 30 years, especially in the last 7 years. But I think ultimately a lot of money is being given away in subsidies here and so on. And like you say, I want to see some return for that. I want to see some return, not just for the urban Indian economy. I want to see it for the whole economy, and especially for the people who are relying on Manrega. I mean, the fact that we're still relying on Manrega after when Manrega was established in 1960s in the Maharashtra famine, if you remember. This is really too long to rely on those sorts of schemes, which only give you 100 days employment. This is really not good enough in the scorecard. When I was in the school, they said, could do better. I think my thing is Indian economy could do better.
So Indian economy did better during 2003 to 2011, when we clocked the rate of growth of 8.3% for those 8 years. So the fact is that we can do it. And that's the
but it hasn't happened again.
But there are several reasons for that, Meghnath. And
there always are, Rajiv. There always are several reasons.
Meghnath, but we did it for 8 years, spanning both the NDA and the UPA government. So it is party agnostic. The economy did well.
World economy was growing.
No, but 2008 was a global crisis. The world economy crashed.
Still survived.
But we still managed to do it 2010 and 11. But so that's one part. The second part is that we have to, and we've had to face the problem of what is called the missing middle. We have not had a growth of our small and medium enterprises. And this is well known. For the first time now, this government has raised the limits of defining MSMEs 10x. From 50 crores, their revenues have been able to go, they can go up to 500 crores. And their investments go up to, from 10 crores to 50 crores or something, 10x. So we are trying for the first time to make sure that the growth impetus comes from that segment of the corporate sector. It is no point at all depending on or expecting the large corporates who have to face global competition to provide employment, because they have to become globally competitive and follow the rules follow the production norms that the others follow. You can't expect a refinery to start employing the people because they will just become inefficient. Our growth in employment will come from this segment. And we are analyzing this segment. The MSMEs are 63 million in this country, according to the census in 2011. Out of that, only 47,000 are medium enterprises. And those 47,000 are now the focus of the Ministry of MSMEs and of the other agencies, because we know that we can target them, we can build dashboards for them, and we can make sure that they can get the growth that they want. Now, they should have the access to formal credit. And for that, there is now an amazing scheme called the Account Aggregator Scheme, which is now being able to deliver credit to them from the formal sector without the physical collateral. And what the term that is being used is information collateral. The 8 of the largest banks in India, SBI and HDFC included, have joined this scheme. The RBI has blessed it. So this is FinTech. This is FinTech 2.0. Did you know that in October this year, the payments on the UPI, the Unified Payment Interface, 4.7 billion transactions took place in 1 month to a tune of $107 billion. Now, this is going to make the transactions so much better, and so much easier for this segment of the people. India is in the process of formalizing its informal sector and reaching to those levels of corporate of the business world, where the growth in GDP and the growth in employment will both come together. And this will come from this 47,000. And lastly, I hope you heard the Prime Minister this time on 15th August. He's talked about reducing the compliance and regulatory burden. Niti Aayog has estimated and given it to all the states, state by state, that all India, we have 67,000 regulatory and compliance burdens. And we have made it out statewide, and we are now engaged with the states to reduce them. And they are doing it so now under persuasion and the pressure. All of this to say that we are making the life at the ground level easier for the small guy to start becoming bigger. Because only when the small guy would become bigger will the growth in both employment and output would come. And all of this is going to happen, and which is what gives me the confidence to say that we will achieve 8% rate of growth and sustain it for a decade or more.
We shall do it. We shall do it.
Right.
Closing thoughts, Lord Desai.
Sorry, I hope and wish you are right and that India prospers. I want India to prosper. So I'm not here to. But, basically, one kind of subsidies are being turned into another kind of subsidies. I don't believe that the burden of regulations will ever decrease, because they'll think of other regulations. We got a huge civil service. They have to do something. They just find new regulations in place of old. But be that as it may, I would be very happy if that happens, because, the small scale industries rhetoric was started in Nehru's time. That, we were going to have all the consumer goods were going to be produced by small scale industries, because the large scale industries are all going to be machine producing. I'm sorry, I'm an old skeptic by now. I have seen for too long promises and promises and promises. And I still wait for the 300 to 400 million people to get what they deserve. And they're not getting what they deserve. And that's what I would like to see.
Professor, both of you are very confident, because you are always talking about subsidies all the time. You are very, I think, concerned about the subsidies. 75 years later, we are still living in a world where subsidies and incentives are going together. So I think industrialists are more subsidized than the farmers are in this country. Therefore, that's a different issue altogether.
One thing where India has been very successful is in digitization.
Right.
Yeah, but that is also, because of digitization, 2/3 of the digitization also during the pandemic, it was proved it was only for the haves people, and have-nots were left out of the system in education. But that also needs to be done, improved. It is doing very well. It can be improved further also. There's no doubt about it.
If you have money, then
you have to have a smartphone in the school, in the villages, 5-7 lakh villages, where students could not attend that school because they didn't have the phone. Anyway, but India has a right on, after 75 years, we are much better now.
happened, a lot which has happened, which has been good. I don't deny it. But it has, as I said, could do better. It is not enough because the bottom has not benefited.
My take is different. After 75 years, people are not addressing the question of how to have an equitable distribution of wealth. That's the question still haunting all of us, at least me as a student of economics.
Would Professor Kumar like to give one closing statement, a response to that, and then we'll call it a day?
That at India at 75 has and will find the new vigor to ensure that when India is at 100, it has become the third largest economy in the world, and our per capita incomes have quadrupled by then, which would have taken care of the bottom 300 million that Meghna talks about.
Good.
That will happen, and I'm sure we are on the path to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
India has never had problems of being big in total income. India has problems on per capita income.
Yes. That's why I spoke about equitable.
Which is why I mentioned the per capita income being quadrupled.
Let me finish. You did mention per capita income.
I did.
I want that India should be at least in a double-digit level rank in per capita income. Right now, 150.
Professor, let us say 25 years from now,
at least 91st.
We will not have Manrega type to give subsistence.
If that happens, I will die happily.
Let us not talk about death.
Meghna, we will ensure that. Meghna, we will ensure that.
The only thing in life is death.
We will see you after 100 also.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It was truly exciting and electric discussion. Thank you very much.